My new super smart Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra keeps me a step ahead thanks to Now Brief with Galaxy AI. It shows me my daily appointments at a glance so I can focus on my passion, posing my pups to recreate French paintings. Bruno, you look like a princess.
Galaxy S25 Ultra, the AI companion that streamlines your day so you can do you. Get yours at Samsung.com. Displays daily select info from select apps. May require internet connection. Galaxy AI features by Samsung free through 2025 and require Samsung account login.
The New Balance Furon V8, crafted for speed, tested and worn by Bukayo Saka. Experience engineered minimalism at its finest and fastest. We updated the Furon V8 for even faster performance on the pitch. Same ultra-lightweight, precision strike-focused design, now with even greater sense of speed. A new speed control stud supports control during sudden stops, sharp pivots, and moves used by the fastest players, like Saka himself. Step up your game in the new Furon V8. Learn more and get yours at newbalance.com/soccer.
There are some things in life that just shouldn't be forgotten, like bringing your keys when you leave the house, setting your fantasy lineup, and most importantly, having Hidden Valley Ranch to watch the game. Especially if wings are on the menu. Those creamy, zesty Cool Ranch flavors take each spicy, savory bite to an unforgettable level. Hidden Valley Ranch, only serious about flavor.
Hello, Rag Squad. When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Aloe or Allbirds or Aviator Nation, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand and brilliant marketing, but an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the businesses, making selling, and for shoppers, buying, simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does selling better than Shopify, who are home of the #1 checkout on the planet. And the not-so-secret secret with Shop Pay that boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning that there are way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going. So, if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling, on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. It's no secret, businesses that want to grow with Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/ranks, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/ranks to upgrade your selling today. That's shopify.com/ranks.
Hello, this is international football commentator Derek Ray, and you're listening to the Ranks FC podcast.
Hello, Rank Squad, and welcome to Ranks AFC. It's your favourite transatlantic football podcast. My name's Jack Collins, and I will be your host today. And joining me across the water, all the way from San Diego, it's Mr. Dean Jones. How you doing, mate?
Hello, mate. Yeah, very good, mate. Yeah, fresh off the back of my first ever game as a San Diego FC season ticket holder, eh?
Yeah, exactly.
Went to the thing. That was cool. So, yeah, we spoke about that in loads of detail on Patreon. So if you want to hear more about the weekend's adventures in San Diego FC, then please do come and join us over there. But yeah, in a nutshell, had a great time. Big MLS fan over here now. I was there. You were in Sweden. Look at us, mate. Gone global, haven't we?
Jet setters. I am sad to report that as much as my best efforts to get to it, I was denied the opportunity to go to Djurgården against IFK Göteborg in the Swedish Cup. And I'm sad I missed it because it turned out to be a 4-3 absolute thriller. So I was a bit devastated that I didn't get to that game, but such is life sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, my game was 0-0, so it would have been a better game than the one I was at. My game was fine. Although I've already had the naysayers like, oh, good game of soccer, was it? I see there was no goals. That sounds fun.
I think dispelling the myth that 0-0s can't be entertaining is one of the biggest problems that football has always had and potentially.
And it's not helped, actually, because I don't know if you saw what Gerard Piqué said. If the match ends 0-0, the teams would score 0 points. It's part of his proposal to improve the game.
You know what? I will say this, like, for a defender, that is wild. Just as a point of interest, like, your job is defending. And I know that PK was a whole lot more than that and loved going up front and all of the above. But for a defender, that is an absolutely wild thing to say. And I understand where he's coming from, because I think what that stops is like the really dull 0-0 draws where both teams are quite happy to sit back and play for a point. And they do occasionally come around. But I think that, you watch a game like the San Diego game at the weekend, for example, where both teams are clearly trying to win the game. And then there's a very, very different thing, and that
they're just not good enough to win the game.
Well, it comes down to one poor finishing, and that's fine. But also, it would make the end of games absolutely nuts. And then the last 10 minutes would be wild.
Yeah. I mean, part of his argument for this is that he thinks the fans that spend loads of money to go to the game are kind of hard done by if they don't see a single goal for their outlay. And I mean, out here, I am seeing like some of the pricing of sporting events generally in America is way beyond what we see in England. People to get into that San Diego game. I mean, I know a couple of people that paid a couple of $100 just to get into that game.
Yeah.
So I understand, like, obviously that is frustrating not to see a goal. I get that, but it's kind of like part and parcel of the game.
The problem is also that, that's coming from Gerard Piqué, who played his entire life at the very, very top level, for clubs who dominated games and went out and set out to win, that a 0-0 would always be a result that would be disappointing for whoever Piqué was playing for. When you are scrapping for your lives at the bottom of the table, when you are a team who is putting everything into, a 0-0 draw against a team far higher up in the league than you is a cause for celebration, especially if you need every single point in order to try and stay in a division or, move towards a goal of some description. And I think to kind of minimize that would be such a disappointment. I mean, look, the ultimate thing with this is that there are ways of putting these kind of jeopardy in games that exist, and that's basically promotion and relegation. But that's a whole different discussion for a whole different day, I imagine, at this point. So worth bearing in mind, I suppose, if nothing else. But I think that PK's heart is probably in the right place with that discussion, but I think he's probably coming at it from maybe the wrong angle.
Yeah, I mean, look, it wouldn't surprise me if that actually was introduced in MLS, if it was to be introduced anywhere. Like, this is the place where something like that happened, where they don't have promotion and relegation at the moment. It's all a bit different. They have the playoffs. Like, the game is different here to how it is in the rest of the world. So it wouldn't totally surprise me if that was adopted here. Without relegation, I think you could maybe introduce that as a rule. I think with relegation, to do so would be an absolute unmitigated disaster. Say. So, well, we'll leave that one there. But I think it's interesting. We're going to start today with things we love before we move on to our main topic, which is going to be talking about some teams who have not won the Premier League in its current guise. And I know that football didn't start in 1992, etc., etc. I did. Well, I didn't really. I started soon afterwards. But, I think I was about in concept at 1992. But football wasn't about long before that. And some of the teams we discussed today have won titles, have won trophies, have won leagues before the Premier League era. So before we get all of those comments, I just want to highlight it, that we're not saying that. We're just trying to use it as a jump off point for what could be an interesting discussion. But we'll come on to that in a little while. Let's go with things we love first. Well, the thing I love, mate, and the thing that I guess has kind of blown my mind in the last couple of days, Fulham are better than Man United for the first time in my life. I never thought this day would come, but it's actually not just something I'm throwing out there. Fulham are actually better than Man United. They've knocked them out of the cup at the weekend, and they're going to finish higher than them in the Premier League table. And that's wild. So for those that don't know, like, I grew up, my dad's a huge Man United fan. My mum's from Fulham. I used to go and watch both. Like, Man United was my big team. Like, I'd go and watch. My dad would take me all the time. His friends would take me. I've been to hundreds of Man United games, and all going through school, like, I saw some great players, some great games, and all of that. And obviously, when you're at school, you want to have that big name attachment. So it's like, it's nice. And like, if I'd have said to someone I support Fulham when I was like 10, they might, one, not have known who they were, and two, otherwise maybe just laughed, because like Fulham at that stage would genuinely have got like attendances of somewhere between 1 and 4 or 5,000. Like Fulham were tiny. We were going out of existence. So I can literally remember the protests, the things that went on to keep the club alive. I remember they would walk around the pitch with these huge blankets, basically, and you would throw money from the stands, throw pound coins in, and they'd try and catch them to try and save Fulham. That's how poor they were. Almost went out of the league, almost went out of business. And obviously, like, that is a long time ago now. But even when Fulham started to climb up the leagues and Al Fayed took us over, and we had I remember going to play against Man United for the first time in the FA Cup, 5th round, I think it was, and Fulham to like 9,000 fans up to Old Trafford. And we lost, I think it was 1-0. Would have been around 1999, something like that. I was still at school, but like I was starting to be able to talk about the fact that like I love Fulham. And then I kind of started to come to this crossroads. I was like, oh, this is all getting a bit weird. My two football worlds are becoming a bit muddled up. And so that was a strange period. But obviously I was also getting to the age where I could start going on my own and stuff. And it was way more natural that I could do that. Just pop down to Fulham within like 40 minutes, then get to Manchester in 4 hours or whatever, with no money. So anyway, the worlds started to collide, and even as they came up, and Fulham's first ever game in the Premier League was against Man United. I was there. This
is where my football context starts to come into existence as well, which is kind of wild.
And I was there, and I was in the away end, and again, it felt weird because I'd always been in the home end, and Lewis Haas scored, and it was an amazing day. Fulham lost the game, but it was like, oh my God, we just competed with Man United, and it was unbelievable. But even in all the years that have passed since that moment, which was, I can't even remember how many years ago that was now, but
it was 2001.
Yeah, so we're going back.
Yeah, Fulham were promoted in 2000, 2001, and then played their first game in the Premier League in 2001.
And it's taken all that time, and obviously Fulham have been up and down and all over the place, but never really thought that it was even feasible that Fulham could be better than Man United. And we're here. And it feels extremely strange. One, because I'm now thousands of miles away and I wasn't like there to experience what it actually feels like on the ground. And I'm watching all these videos of people that we know who were at the game and stuff and lauding it up. But how have Man United managed to make such a mess of this? And obviously, like, we won't go into it today, but there's protests being planned again around Man United and the club's slow death. And all these years that the Glazer stuff's been going on, like, I feel like fair enough. Like, you got to do that. It's your club, and you feel strongly about it. But like, the club's actually dying. Like, Man United is like so far now from what they were, that I genuinely don't know how or when they can come back. And like, the reason I think that this is really fitting for today's episode is like, as a football fan, you've just got to always have that hope and that drive that you can get to these moments. So today we're going to talk about like who could become the next new Premier League champion, basically who can do a Leicester City, right? And it always feels like it's probably impossible. But it always felt impossible that Fulham could be better than Man United. It always felt impossible that Man United could fall as far as they have. But football does move in cycles. And so there's always hope that you can come back. There's always hope that you can do something that feels unimaginable. And so I think it's quite fitting with where we're going to head with this episode today. And just whoever you support, you should know and you should feel that one day things will change. And one day Liverpool will be bad again. I mean, it's been a long time since they're bad, but Liverpool will be bad, Man City will be bad, and that your team might have that chance to actually win stuff.
It's weird, isn't it? And actually, I'm glad you've done this as a Things We Love, because I wanted to talk about something that's on the same kind of brand, shall we say. And it's the 8 teams in the quarterfinals of the FA Cup. Now, obviously, what Fulham did at the weekend was great from a personal perspective. I actually thought it was a pretty even game, generally. Across the course, it could have gone either way. Obviously, ended up in penalties. And there was a few games like that, right? The Bournemouth one, the Nottingham Forest one against Ipswich. And I think you kind of look at it and, you look at the teams in the quarterfinals. So Aston Villa, who are obviously a major club, massive club, but won their last major trophy in 1996. Last won the FA Cup in 1957. Nottingham Forest, who again are a huge club, but have been in the doldrums for quite some years, whose last major trophy was in 1990, and they last won the FA Cup in 1959. Preston North End, whose last FA Cup was actually their last major trophy, which was in 1938, one of the original founding members of the Football League, very much the underdogs in this 8, but a very, very famous old club steeped in history. Tom Finney and the way that, football was created in the country has so much to do with Preston North End. And Deepdale is an amazing place to go historically. There was a reason that the National Football Museum was there for a long, long period of time. It's now been moved to Manchester, but, these things all matter. And then you go to Bournemouth, never won a major trophy, never won the FA Cup. Brighton, never won a major trophy, never won the FA Cup. Crystal Palace, never won a major trophy, never won the FA Cup. Fulham, never won a major trophy, never won the FA Cup. So 4 of the 8 teams left have never won the FA Cup or a major trophy. Of the remaining 4, 3 of them haven't won the FA Cup since 1960. And that leaves Manchester City, who have obviously won this trophy a lot. They won it in 2023. Their last major trophy was last year with the Premier League. So they are the major, major exception to the rule here with what's going on. And with City, yes, okay, they're getting better. They're finding a little bit of a rhythm again, a little bit of a groove. But with City feeling more vulnerable than they have, I think, in many a long year, this is majorly open. And that trip to Bournemouth for City looks like a very, very tricky task. Bournemouth have been exceptional at home all season long. They will be bang up for that game. We've seen them give City problems over the course of this season already. And you kind of look at the rest of them, Fulham Palace, one of those 2 sides is going to be going to Wembley, which is unbelievable for both sets of fans. You're kind of looking at Brighton against Nottingham Forest, which looks like a really, really interesting game, especially considering what happened a couple of weeks ago in that fixture. Yes, it was at the City Ground, but lots to think about. And then Villa against Preston, which is 2 titans, old titans of the game, very much kind of founding members who are in this situation where they'd both be desperate to get to Wembley as well. That is a very, very cool situation for everybody to be in. And I think that for me, and I know that people will be like, broadcast rights and all of these things. We have this discussion on SiriusXM quite a lot, which is that I think the teams in Europe for any particular year shouldn't be in the Carabao Cup, shouldn't be in the League Cup. I think it should be removed from it, and it would give different fan bases an opportunity to experience, the potential of winning a trophy, sure, but also the potential of kind of kicking on it and getting to even a showpiece event at Wembley. And when you people will be like, oh, well, is it going to be counted as a serious trophy if the big teams aren't in it? I would probably just point you to the Europa League and be like, okay, people think, and people do rightly consider the Europa League a major trophy. It doesn't matter that the Champions League teams aren't in it, still a major trophy. And so I would probably just point to that and be like, maybe the Carabao Cup thing. And I think the fact that everyone is quite excited about this FA Cup having this as a last 8 probably speaks to the fact that there is an appetite for this kind of thing. There's obviously a brilliant documentary series by Copper90 and Ellie Menjum on the internet about, which is basically called Once in a Lifetime, which is basically following clubs to finals who have not got there in a long time or, who have never won a trophy. And that was, Real Betis, it was Freiburg. You're kind of looking at them in Trabzonspor and kind of looking at them and be like, this only comes around, once in a lifetime. I was going to say a blue moon. But I think that it's important to kind of document those stories because that's what football is about. It's not just about the same teams winning the same trophies over and over and over and over and over and over again. And whilst we can look at this Liverpool side and be rightly, full of praise and adulation and admiration for the way that they are playing, and we absolutely should be, is unbelievably fun that Liverpool, who are the best side in the country, are not in this FA Cup because it means that there is no City are favourites, but not by a country mile. Not in the way that you would have expected. If I'd given you this quarter-final lineup at the end of last season, you would have looked at me and said, City have won the FA Cup. But I don't feel like anyone thinks like that right now. And I think that's what makes it so exciting.
Yeah, I mean, the last 2 years, we've obviously seen the same FA Cup final as well, which is a Manchester derby. So it's like, he's had that extra spice to it. But the fact that definitely can't happen now that Man United are knocked out, obviously, is nice. The year before that in 21-22, it was Liverpool versus Chelsea. And you have to go back to the season before that when it was Leicester 1, Chelsea 0 in 2021. Obviously played in front of a sparse crowd on the back of COVID and stuff. But you don't get many FA Cup finals where you get an underdog story. Unfortunately, when it does happen, teams tend to get a bit of a pummeling. Manchester City 6, Watford 0 back in 2019.
Yeah,
wasn't
I was at
quite
that game.
The day out that Watford probably wanted. 2015, Aston Villa made it through to the FA Cup final, smashed 4-0 by Arsenal. Year before that, Hull City were beaten by Arsenal. But then there was that story when Wigan beat Man City in 2013. Man City weren't the monster they are now.
2008, right? 2008 was, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Portsmouth against Cardiff City.
Portsmouth against Cardiff, yeah. Portsmouth won 1-0. Now, I'm not sure what the global viewing figures were for Portsmouth versus Cardiff. I'm actually pretty sure I was on holiday in America at the time, and I think I was just like, I can't be bothered to watch that.
Well, part of the problem, aren't you?
I'm part of the problem here, definitely. Yeah, I was hoping it was Man United v Man City, and I'd have watched it. But look, so these teams do make it, but usually when you get there, you're up against a giant, and it's very difficult to overcome that. So basically, everyone was just praying Man City do go out. But Man City aren't obviously what they were, but they're still like, they should now go and win this trophy. But because of what we've seen from them, we know that they're beatable. So yeah, a fascinating...
That's a horrible draw. I'm telling you, that's a horrible draw for City. That's the one thing I think they would have looked at and gone, not that, please. Not Bournemouth away. That's the one game I think of all of these, of everyone else, maybe actually Villa away. Maybe Villa away or Bournemouth away, they'll be like, we'd like to avoid those two, please. And they've got one of them.
My amazing new Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra reduces noise in my concert videos with Galaxy AI, taking them from this to this. Now I have time to bejewel my favorite artists' faces onto jackets. This one really captures their eyes.
Galaxy S25 Ultra, the AI companion that reduces distractions so you can do you. Get yours at Samsung.com. Compatible with common video formats, accessible in gallery, helps minimize 6 select sounds. Results vary. Galaxy AI features by Samsung free through 2025.
And that makes things very interesting.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So let's see, mate. But yeah, there we go. Our little run through of where we sit emotionally and literally with the FA Cup this season.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to be continuing this conversation in a slightly different guise and a slightly different vehicle after the break in our main ranking. So don't go anywhere. Welcome back to the Ranks FC podcast, where it's time for our main ranking. And today we're going a little bit hypothetical. So I'm going to give the floor to Mr. Dean Jones.
Yeah, look, Liverpool are on course to win the Premier League this season. They've won it before, so it isn't anything brand new for us. But it's nice to have a new winner after Man City winning it for the past 4 years. But who's the next new Premier League winner? That's what I want to know. Who is going to be the new Leicester City? And is it possible? We've seen some big teams rising this season. I say big teams. I don't really mean like literally, because I'm talking about the likes of, Bournemouth are up there in 7th place at the moment. Brighton are in 8th. Fulham are in 9th. These teams really punching above their weight, you could say, when you look at the size of the fan bases and the stadiums and what their history's been. And you've even got Nottingham Forest up there in 3rd place at the moment. So the league's really had a bit of a shake-up recently. And while, Liverpool sit on top of the pile, are we going to get to a time, or more like when are we going to get to a time when someone new wins this league? So I'm going to run through 5 candidates, 5 to 1.
5? That's a lot. I had to think about this after you gave me the title, and I was like, I could probably do 3 and a bonus.
No, I wanted to do 5 because I wanted to open this up a bit, because it could be a while, right? That's the thing I've had to take into account here. This isn't going to probably happen in the next 2 years. We might be looking at something that extends to even 10 years before we get a new winner. We don't know. So at number 5, I've got Leeds United.
Okay. All right.
Now, Leeds, top of the Championship right now, so not even in the Premier League. But
that kind of doesn't matter. I get it.
It doesn't matter. Yeah, exactly. And when you actually go through who is in the Premier League right now, and then you consider where Leeds are, you're like, they've got a better chance, actually, of most of the teams that haven't won the Premier League who are actually already in it. They do have a huge fan base. I know there's this thing online about Leeds would have taken more, and it is funny, but Leeds
we haven't
support,
seen it that much actually recently.
We haven't seen that
there was
much
a
recently.
real period for about a decade where it didn't matter what it was Leeds would have taken more.
Mate, their support is phenomenal. It's that they are brilliant. Home and away. Ellen Road is always rocking. Well, not in their really bad years. It wasn't rocking. It was half empty. But fair enough. They tried to stick it through as long as they could, and they hit some dark times. But they have come through that. They're very excited at the moment. Leeds United were the last team to win the league before it became the Premier League. So in 1992, Leeds United were the champions. And it was in 1993 that the Premier League was won for the first time, and Man United won the league. So Leeds do have some history there. They've shown ambition before, and I think they can show it again. We've seen that they've had financial input. They're attached to the 49ers enterprise. They've had buy-in from Red Bull. You know, there's always that potential with Leeds that they could suddenly go boom and they could go out there. Now, in past years, it's also been that they could go bust at any minute, right? So they've experienced the other side of this. But Leeds are a side that have done well in the Champions League, right? They've had extended runs
in our lifetime,
competition. And you look back and they've had players like Harry Kewell who have been like phenomenal for the league and have been like global names. And so I don't think it's ridiculous to put Leeds United in when I'm doing an extended list to say that they could do it. When I'm considering who could be the next new team to win the Premier League, I'm considering things like, okay, well, how long are we talking here? Is it 1 to 5 years, 5 to 10 years, 10 years or more? And look, for Leeds, I'm not saying that they're going to win the league within 5 years. I'm not saying that. But
I'm really glad you're not saying that as well.
Within 10 years, maybe.
I mean, the problem with this is, and the problem with putting the fifth, I absolutely agree with all the sentiment you're putting in here. And actually, I think them becoming loosely affiliated with the global Red Bull model might not be a great thing for football as a whole. But in terms of what they're going to be able to pick up from talent pipelines elsewhere, et cetera, I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think that obviously we speak about Ellen Road being an incredible place to watch football, and it really, really is. I don't care if you're a home fan or an away fan. It's an amazing old stadium. And it is one of those places that just breathes football, you know, in its kind of entirety. I get all of it. And they've now added a post-match song when they win, playing I Predict a Riot, which is a huge step in the right direction to success, as we know. What I would say, though, is that I don't know who you've got in the rest of this ranking, but if you have Brighton outside of it, then I think Brighton are more likely to win the league than Leeds are. I think where Brighton are in their model.
I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. Players will leave Brighton quicker than they would leave Leeds if things were going well.
I think the problem is with that argument, though, is that what Leicester showed us is, all the things have to fall in the right place and you have to be in the right kind of situation to take advantage of it. But there is also an element of it can just be all things in the right place for one season. The question isn't who's going to build a dynasty, because then I think your argument holds up. Whereas I think that considering where Brighton are, and look what Brighton spent last year, right? Look what they spent in the summer. That was a massive, massive outlay, the most in club history by a country mile. I think they spent, second or third most in world football, in terms of what they brought in. Now, they've been able to do that because of their model, not because suddenly Brighton have been pumped full of money by a nation state, but by the fact that they have literally been able to bring in a model where they're bringing through talent at a young age and flipping it for major profits has allowed them to spend. And look, I was reading an interview with Paul Barber today, and it basically said this was the high water point in terms of what we spent. It probably won't spend like that again, because actually the model isn't going to work forever, because obviously other teams are going to also start picking up talents at a young age, although there will always be a market. And I thought that was an interesting point. But I think that where they are right now in terms of their squads, in terms of the build, in terms of the attraction that they have for young players who will look at the players that have come through Brighton in recent years and go, Yeah, I'd actually like a little bit of that, please. I think that their scouting model, their networks, their world football networks are all completely in the right place. And I think that if someone was going to step through the gears to actually go and put together an unlikely title charge, the fact that they gamble on certain players, the fact that they gamble on young managers like Fabian Hertzler, I think all of that puts them in a place where if the right elements came into the equation, they'd be the kind of side I'd back. If you know what I mean? I wouldn't back Brighton to build a dynasty and win 3 league titles in 10 years. But I would probably back them to be able to take advantage of a year like Leicester did.
My problem is that it's difficult to foresee a season like the one where Leicester had, where nobody was that good in the entire league. And because now you look at what Liverpool are, what Man City still have, what Arsenal have, and that there are 2 or maybe 3 teams still better built than Brighton.
Oh,
and
you
Brighton
say that, but what if Liverpool
they're a
had
selling club, though.
Manager this
Brighton are
summer?
a selling club. They don't have... They, as soon as someone gets good, they sell them. Caicedo, Cucurella, Ben White, Alexis McAllister, Bissouma, Trossard, all of them. As soon as they get to any good, they sell them.
Yeah, but think about how
they don't have the longevity.
Think about the players that replace those players.
Yeah, but they're not the next level up that would go and win them the league. They might maintain the level that they were already at, and that's not going to be good enough to get there. And I think that there's always going to be, because Brighton aren't a big team. I agree with you in the sense that Brighton probably are the most comparable team to Leicester in terms of like what they have and what they could do in a one-off season. But I would say that with Leeds, if they started to become good, there would be more inclination for a player to hang around because of the size and the tradition of what Leeds are. Whereas with Brighton, I think they'd be like, yeah, I'm going to go there. I'm going to go to Chelsea or Arsenal or Liverpool, whatever.
Yeah.
That would be my argument against Brighton. But I take your point fully.
Okay. I think they're 2 probably sides of a different coin, but I think it's interesting. I do think, though, that, you say we're unlikely to have another season like Leicester. We were Liverpool making a bad appointment away from having another season like Leicester.
Well, Arsenal would have won it.
They would have won it, but then, not running away with it.
No, not running away with it. It leads me into number 4, and that's why I've got Nottingham Forest there. Because I didn't think Forest would be able to maintain this. I didn't think they would still be 3rd in the Premier League table at this stage of a season. With 27 games gone, and Nottingham Forest are sat there in a Champions League place reasonably comfortably. I'm not saying that they can rest on their laurels by any sense of the imagination at the moment, because they're 4 points clear of Newcastle, who are 6th. But they've put up a really good effort to remain in there. And what we know about Nottingham Forest, big club, incredible history. Their ownership is really aggressive in terms of the ambition and the players that they're going after. Now, they're not landing them all, but they've been linked with and tried to get some big names in the past couple of years. And they've obviously gone into some transfer windows and signed what was the window where they signed 20 odd players or whatever it was. They're going a bit mad. It's because they're ready to take the opportunity. They're like, if we're going to make this leap, we've got to go all in and kind of move up 3 levels at one time rather than do the steady. I think that if they can stabilise this and make sure there's no fall off, and Nottingham Forest are in a reasonably strong situation to actually keep this going. The only concern is, and this is double-edged really, they need to be in the Champions League so they can attract those bigger names. But then you've got to deal with the schedule of having the Champions League alongside the Premier League. So if I was to put a time frame on when can Nottingham Forest win it, I would be shorter than Leeds United, but it's not going to be within maybe, I don't know. I was going to say not within 3 years, but...
I think maybe the point with this is, do Forest feel like they're riding the crest of a wave a little bit? Yes. And that's fine. This isn't a criticism of Nottingham Forest. I kind of feel like you might have to do it whilst you're riding the wave. I'd almost go the exact opposite to your Leeds argument. I'd be like, if Forest are going to do this, I think they have to do it in the next 3 years.
Yeah, they might. That kind of stopped there on 3 years as I was talking, because I was going to say 3 to 5 years. I was like, actually 5 years might be too long because other teams would have had too much time. Even Man United might be in the picture by 5 years.
Let's not be silly, shall we?
but it'll feel like they've never won the Premier League by the time we get to that. So
you ruined your number one. just on this, and I think this is why I think that maybe Forest have to do it like immediately if they're going to do it, and I don't think they are. It's because Marinakis has been so aggressive with their transfer strategy, so much so that it ended up with them having points deductions last season, right? And they're going to try and avoid that again, and that's fine. And obviously the rules are going to change next year in terms of what you can spend, etc., etc. Fine. My problem is that Marinakis is the 15th wealthiest owner in the Premier League right now. And so whilst he has spent and whilst he's been aggressive, is there a world where they can do this with the current financial setup they have? Because there's a reason the Forest are hit with a points deduction, right? And it's not, as everyone seems to think, that because they, are not one of the traditional teams that are at the top of the Premier League and the Premier League had to punish them. It's because you're within the current structure of payments, etc., and PSR and all of the rest of it. You have to remain within your limitations, not only as as a club, but also in terms of ownership models, etc., as well. And I wonder if, because he is not a nation state, for example, and I know that Forest are part of an interesting network of teams, and that actually the multi-club model, again, I'm not saying it's a good thing for football, but I do think in terms of the teams that we're talking about, it has the potential to be a positive thing. That can help. But I wonder if there does just come a point where the cash runs out and there is no scope for that to happen. At the moment, it feels like all the elements have kind of come together for Forest. They have a wonderful manager who I admire hugely, who has a setup that I think, to begin with, for the first half of the season, kind of tripped teams up. Second half of the season, I think we've seen Forest drop away a little bit. There's a reason they haven't fallen down the table, is because everyone else has been really inconsistent and the middle class keeps beating each other in the Premier League. But I think that there is probably a sense that, they're going to have to innovate now. They're going to have to do something different. They can't continue to play in this way. And we did this on The Truth a while back. Which of the teams kicking above their weight right now are most likely to be able to sustain it? And we said that Forest, it works. But, is there going to come a point where teams will be like, well, we're not going to just keep running at you and allow you to attack us in transition. We're going to make you open up. And at that point, how do Forest adapt? How does that work? Weirdly, I think Forest will do quite well in the Champions League if they get there, because I think this setup will work really nicely against some of the biggest teams, because they'll be like, what is going on? It's the reason they were able to trip up Liverpool, for example. But I wonder how sustainable it is in terms of a title charge or something like that. I think there would need to be a fair bit of flexibility and adaptability that maybe this squad, where it's at right now, doesn't have within it. And I do wonder that if you bring in bigger names, bigger egos into that system, is Nuno going to be the man to kind of dominate those? We saw what happened at Spurs, etc., etc.
They're not really doing that, though, because what they are doing is they're investing in undervalued talent.
The Brighton model
is not fulfilling its potential. So, say Elanga, say Hudson-Odoi, right? They're two players that just haven't fulfilled the full potential of where they should be. And they're like, we'll give you an opportunity. We'll give you those games. We'll make you feel happy. Those are the types of players. That is actually how, and it's a bit more like Leicester because they didn't really have any big names. That's a little bit more fitting. And they will be ambitious, like I say.
It's
I think
Roy
they
Hodgson's Fulham.
Yeah, they will sign a couple of players that are big. But, like Murillo at the back, he could play for pretty much anyone at this point. They haven't really gone down that path. Like players like Sangare, big buys, but it's not like they were at the top of world football. They've just been really careful about signing players that suit a certain model, and they've been quite pragmatic about it, really, in terms of the team build and the model of the side. So
big spends, actually, maybe minus Morgan Gibbs-White, who's been obviously excellent, haven't all come off that well. Sangare hasn't been a fixture in this first team. They've kind of actually, and that's an interesting point. You talk about that kind of model. And I often talk about Fulham as this, and I'm not trying to be Fulham centric here, I'm really not. But one of the things that Marco Silva's done really well, and I've praised him for, is getting the most out of players who have been discarded elsewhere, right? Your Andreas Pereiras, your Raul Jimenez's, your Adama Traore's, players that a lot of people thought were finished. But I think what Forest have done quite nicely in combining those is they've kind of gone a bit Fulham and a little bit Brighton. And I'm not saying that these two clubs invented these systems or anything like that, but just for, ease of discussion. Brighton's model feels a bit Maria, feels a bit Danilo in the middle of the park. The Fulham model feels a bit Chris Wood, feels a little bit Hudson-Odoi, feels a bit Elanga, right? Yeah. And they've combined those two things really well in a way, and which is a reason that they are 6 places above Fulham in the league table, because they've actually been able to kind of get the best of both worlds.
Yeah, that's fair. But yeah, I just feel there's a bit of potential there for that club. But again, there's a reason that Forest and Leeds are 4 and 5. It's because it's still extremely unlikely. So let's go on to 3, which is probably the most realistic that we've got so far. And if you were to cut this show back, you would have just done a 1, 2, 3 of these clubs. And at 3 is Tottenham Hotspur. Tottenham, the bottlers themselves, right? This is the issue with Tottenham. It's more a mentality thing than anything. It's all there. Tottenham are underachieving. Tottenham are giving a false sense of where they actually are right now. And it is partly because of these injuries. And I do have some sympathy for Ange on that front, because they've got a good squad. If you just put every player in front of you, it's a good squad. If you then bring into it the world-class stadium that they're playing in, the unbelievable training centre that they've had built, that is like above and beyond almost every other club in England, the facilities that they can provide any player. You then consider recent history and the fact that it's not that long since Tottenham came close-ish to winning the Premier League. They had a second-place finish in 2017, and the seasons around it, they had third-place finishes, and they finished in top 5, and they've been kind of knocking on that door and showing that they had some intent to get in there. Now, obviously, they've never actually gone and done it, and as we talk right now, they've obviously drifted a little bit, but I say in the circumstances are difficult to judge. I think they should stick with Postecoglou. All messages are out of Tottenham that they are sticking with Postecoglou, and it's kind of unwavering at this moment, even if he doesn't get that second season trophy that he always talks about.
It feels like the worst has passed with this, doesn't it? It feels like the storm has passed a little bit.
I think so, yeah. And I think he deserves to get beyond this point, right? The smile's back on his face a little bit now. The jokes are starting to come out a little bit more in press conferences. And if he ever had a full squad available to him, I genuinely think that Tottenham could be something, and then we'd just have that mental state to deal with. Like, can this team actually achieve a league title? Can they put forward a genuine case for actually beating all their big 6 rivals to a title? They have a history of falling apart, of falling short. Obviously, there's always been a question of Daniel Levy digging deep. Will he spend big enough at the level required to get Tottenham to that level? And will they always make sure that there are no gaps in the squad? There always feels like there's something missing at Tottenham. I'm actually been quite impressed, to be honest, with the type of recruitment that they've done over the past few windows. Yeah. They're actually, on the quiet, putting together a good team build that suits the manager and suits what they're trying to build. They just haven't been able to bring it all together at the same time. And I think Levy, while he's getting all this abuse, will have quiet confidence, actually, in what he is building. And that might be part of the reason why he is going to stick with Postecoglou, because he's been part of this too. And he knows that there is more to come. I'm not saying there'll be loads of transfer business in the summer, but they'll be good looking to get 5 players out the door, and then they'll look to, Matis Tel, they'll look to do that deal permanently. They'll look to bring in another midfielder. They'll look to add further. It won't be like top range unless they have to replace a Son or a Romero, which is feasible. They might have to do that. But I think Tottenham winning the Premier League in 5 years' time is achievable if they absolutely nail it and they don't have such bad luck that they had this season.
Yeah, I actually agree. And I think this goes a little bit deeper than that, because actually what you're seeing with Spurs, and maybe some of this has been forced, but actually you look at the young talent in this Spurs squad, right? So Archie Gray has played an incredible amount of minutes this season, albeit not in his favoured position, fine, but he's played an incredible amount of minutes for an 18-year-old. Lucas Bergvall, 19, very much feels like a first-team fixture in this squad now. We've seen the emergence of Mikey Moore. Yeah, we're not quite sure exactly what his ceiling is, but things look pretty good. You see Matthias Tell come in, 19 years old. Looks like that's going to be made permanent in the summer. You're looking at someone like a Wilson Odobert, who's also had injury issues, but very talented young player at 20 years old. Kinski, the young keeper that joined in January, already had that taste of Premier League experience. Yeah, he's not there yet, but 21 years old. Destiny Adogi is 22. Pape Matar is 22. Brennan Johnson, 23. Mickey van der Ven, 23. Jed Spence, 24. Kulusevski, 24. They're all players who haven't hit their prime yet. And how many of those have we seen make serious strides forward this season in terms of, one, their output, but two, in terms of the minutes that they've been given? You add to that the fact that, you have someone like a Solanke who's just entering his prime, you'd imagine, at 27, similar for Romero at 26, Danso at 26, brought in at this point. You add to that the fact that Vicario is only 28, which is still very, very young for a goalkeeper. Yes, there are things that need to be sorted out in this squad. But also, the likes of someone like Vuskovic, who is so incredibly rated kind of across the board in world football, joining Spurs. You look at someone like Yang, who joined in January and joined QPR, who I think is 18 years old as well, on top of that. There are a lot of players here who are in a very kind of young category who are already getting an extraordinary amount of minutes within this Spurs setup. And are all of them going to be world beaters? No, of course they're not, right? I'm not going to sit here and tell you that every single one of those players is going to make it to the top level. What they have got, and what I agree with you on, is not only a good squad build that's slowly starting to come together into something more that Ange wants, I think. The opportunity to then flesh that out with a couple of major signings. And then you're kind of looking at it and going, okay, they're not that many pieces away. Now, the pieces they need to add are difficult to get hold of, right? So they need a controlling midfielder, and almost everyone does. So they're not going to get their first pick of who comes into that slot. But I do think that the amount of minutes that these young players have been exposed to this season, even if it's been difficult, puts Spurs in a really interesting position in like 2 years' time, if they all live up to their potential. And I think we're starting to see quite a lot of them do that already. But I am also always high on Ange, so...
Do you know what I could also see happening as well? I mean, if this squad build goes the way they want it to and all the rest of it... And
you're going to say Harry Kane going home for one final season, aren't you?
I am, yeah. I am, because Harry Kane, as I understand it, is very open to the fact of going back to Tottenham. Once he's gone and got a couple of trophies somewhere, which he looks like he'll get his hands on this season.
Leaving to go and get a couple of trophies and coming back is actually such hilarious vibes.
He's going to stay at Bayern Munich for next season. I know there's talk at the moment about Harry Kane leaving Bayern Munich in the summer. I'm told that won't happen. So I'll do next season at Bayern Munich. What if Harry Kane comes back and actually ends up being part of a Premier League winning Tottenham team? What a story. Now, obviously, I'm getting a little bit far-fetched and carried away here, because there's still the big question of whether Tottenham are going to be bottlers until the rest of time, right? And that's something that they're going to have to deal with. And Daniel Levy at some point is going to have to prove to people that he does spend big and correctly when it really matters. But if the pieces were to fall into place perfectly in the perfect season, I think Tottenham are the third best placed side to actually be the next new team to win the Premier League.
I actually think you've put them low.
Yeah?
I would have had them above this.
Wow.
I would have had them maybe not a 1, but definitely a 2. Because I think I have a lot of faith in this young crop. And I think that's the thing that tips the scales for me. We talk about Chelsea and the frustrations that the fan base have right now and all of those things. And I completely appreciate it. But we also talk about Chelsea and say, well, if this works in 3 years' time, they're going to look absolutely unbelievable. And I think Tottenham sometimes go under the radar in terms of squad planning with also that kind of thing. Yes, you need experienced heads. And I don't think that Chelsea have gone about it in completely the correct way. And actually, you'd probably argue that the squad build at Spurs is actually a little bit more sensible than the one at Chelsea, because they haven't just thrown all of their eggs into that basket. But I do think it's kind of intriguing that with all of this going on together, their youth build has slipped a little bit below the kind of common discussion about.
I I can say to my new Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra, hey, find a keto-friendly restaurant nearby and text it to Beth and Steve. And it does, without me lifting a finger. So I can get in more squats anywhere I can. 1, 2, 3.
Will that be cash or credit?
Credit. 4.
Galaxy S25 Ultra, the AI companion that does the heavy lifting so you can do you. Get yours at Samsung.com. Compatible with select apps. Requires Google Gemini account. Results may vary based on input. Check responses for accuracy.
Optimize your nutrition with Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal service. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. Choose from 40 weekly options across 8 dietary preferences like Calorie Smart and Protein Plus. Factor's keto meals can help you lose up to 8 pounds in 8 weeks. Get started at factormeals.com/factor50off to get 50% off, plus free shipping on your first box. Weight loss with Factor Keto based on a randomized controlled clinical trial. Results will vary depending on diet and exercise.
Hello, Rag Squad. When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Aloe or Allbirds or Aviator Nation, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand and brilliant marketing, but an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the businesses, making selling and for shoppers buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does selling better than Shopify, who are home of the #1 checkout on the planet. And the not-so-secret secret with Shop Pay that boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning that there are way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going. So, if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling, on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. It's no secret, businesses that want to grow with Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/ranks, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/ranks to upgrade your selling today. That's shopify.com/ranks. Hotspurs, at the very least, going on elsewhere. And I think maybe this bad season probably doesn't help.
I've got trust issues for sure. And that includes with Daniel Levy, who, if Tottenham did have a bad start to next season, would probably just sack Ange Postecoglou to defend himself and start all over again, which would be completely the wrong thing to do, probably.
Build something.
You'd be starting all over again.
That's how you do it. Right, we're going to take a break there. And after the break, Dean's going to fill us in on numbers 2 and 1. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Ranks FC, where it's time to finish off this main ranking. Teams who are new, who haven't won the Premier League. Yes, they might have won the league before it became the Premier League, but that's not part of this discussion. And Dean has 2 teams left to discuss with us. So let's get into it, Dean.
This team is playing right now as we record this podcast in the last 16 of the Champions League. It's Aston Villa. Unai Emery completely transformed not just this team, but this football club, and changed the belief, the limits of a fan base that honestly, at times this season, have probably just been like on this whirlwind journey where they just thought they were going to win everything. Like at times when Villa are good, they're really, really good. Now they often come back to earth with a jolt, but they've got ambitious owners here. They're backing the project. They're backing the manager, and they are on one hell of a rise right now. I mean, don't forget, this is a team that was promoted from the Championship in 2019. So it's only since the 2019-20 season that they've actually been back in the Premier League. In that first season back, they finished 17th. Then it was 11th. And then 14th.
First season back, we should add the Hawkeye technology not working potentially saved Aston Villa season.
Yeah, true. But in the last 2 seasons, Villa managed to get a 7th place finish. And then, of course, last season, they came 4th, which got them into the Champions League. They're still competing in the Champions League, and they are still in a position right now where they could qualify for the Champions League again, whether it's through winning a trophy or by actually making it through the league itself. Now, it's been a difficult juggle for Unai Emery this season, and definitely at the times his team has suffered because of the scheduling of the games and the weight of which he puts emphasis on needing to win in which competition. There's no doubt about that. But Aston Villa, yes, they're 10th in the league right now. Again, a bit false because of the way that they've had to consider the Champions League. I think because of the way they're building, because of the way they're buying. Look, first of all, I don't think it's unreasonable. They can still finish in the top 5 this season. They're only, let me just check, 4 points off of Chelsea, who are in 5th place. So that's definitely catchable. But
that is definitely catchable. There's just a lot of bodies in the way.
Just a lot of bodies in the way who are also obviously trying to get into there. So that's what it is. But Aston Villa, man, they're good. And Unai Emery is very good too. And this is the thing this is the reason I kind of give them the edge on Tottenham, right? Is because they've got a proven top manager. This is a guy that's won the Europa League 4 times. He's won trophies in France as well. And he's got a huge respect in the game. And I think he's still got a lot to do and a lot to prove. He's only 53, Unai Emery, right? In managerial terms, great age.
Great age.
And if they just trust this process, if they stick it out with Emery, then they're going to have an edge actually on a lot of the Premier League who are coming into times when they're in a period of managerial instability. I mean, at some stage in the next couple of years, Pep Guardiola won't be the Manchester City manager. So they could go through even more turbulence during that period. We'll see what happens with Liverpool and Slot. At the moment, things look very good for them. We'll see what happens with Arteta and whether Arsenal do stick that out like it seems they insist they're going to, and whether he's actually capable of being able to put together a title-winning team.
Chelsea, Maresca.
At the moment, I'd say Unai Emery is a better manager than Arteta, right? Like if I was to choose someone to go and lead me to a title, I think I would choose Emery over Arteta. I would choose Emery over Maresca. Maresca seems to overcomplicate things at the moment. We'll see whether he gets the time to prove that that's not the case, that he's just learning on the job.
I mean, obviously, they're both much younger, and so this isn't necessarily a slight on either of them. But yes, if you were to offer me any of those managers right now, I would take Unai Emery.
So are we saying then that he is the best manager, the best equipped manager to go out and win the Premier League outside of those obvious clubs? I think we are. And that's their biggest strength. And so Aston Villa are in a wonderful situation where they're not having to consider whether they trust their manager and his philosophy. And as long as they can back him. And they might actually be able to win the Premier League. I think they're in a really good situation. Now, obviously, long-term consistency comes into question. We haven't seen that fully yet. We are seeing the struggles that they have at the moment, adapting the squad to deal with the rigours of all the competitions. And can they truly go toe-to-toe in a title race with a Liverpool or a Manchester City? Who knows? We'd have to wait to see that. But I think the second best equipped team to go out there and become the next new team to win the Premier League is Aston Villa.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously, we're both major fans of Unai Emery, right? And I have been for a long, long time, since that first spell at Valencia, all the way through to what he achieved at Sevilla and Villarreal and PSG, and now to Aston Villa. And I think that you're kind of looking at it and thinking, okay, this is someone that we completely and utterly trust, right? In terms of managerial exploits and all the rest of it. What I find interesting about Villa is that I think sometimes people forget how rich they are. And at some point in this discussion, and I imagine we're going to go on to it in even further depth in your number one, comes down to how much money you have. Now, right now, there are constraints in terms of PSR, etc., that Villa are having to adhere to very, very, rigorously. I was going to say vigorously there. That was the wrong word. But you kind of look at it and you think about the players they sold last summer, some of the weird wheeling and dealing that Monchi's had to do in terms of, buying players and just flipping them on immediately to other places, buying players back and flipping them on immediately. The likes of someone like a Jaden Philogene or a Cameron Archer. They must be like, I hate this club. Why do they keep buying me and selling me off again? Yeah. Very, very weird. But I think that they've had to do a little bit of a dance, Villa, in terms of, their income and the players that are there, et cetera, et cetera. And I think we saw in January, even if we didn't see it in the summer, I think a lot of us looked at that Villa summer and thought, it's probably not how I would have gone about it if I was having to juggle the Premier League and the Champions League at the same time and have serious ambitions of competing at the top of both. But kind of on the flip side, I think what we saw in January was a team willing to go out and one, take a gamble on a couple of players, but two, who have the allure to be able to attract a Marcus Rashford and a Marco Asensio to the club in that January window. And part of that comes with this kind of like, oh, okay, they're here and they're here to stay. And yes, obviously it's loan deals, but I think that you're kind of looking at players who are interested in being part of the project. That is a good thing. That's a majorly good thing from an Aston Villa perspective. My slight concern is that this squad is slightly on the kind of outside in terms of their prime ages, etc. And that's probably why I would have Spurs above them, just in terms of the squad build. And Emery does like to work with slightly more seasoned players who tuck in and who are willing to listen to him in a way that maybe Postecoglou doesn't. So it's not necessarily a slight, or it's just a comparison. And I think that just in terms of a squad build, Spurs are probably in a better place slightly longer term than Villa are. But you kind of look at this squad and there's a lot of players in their prime. There's a lot of players in those kind of golden ages that you want players in. There's a lot of players that I trust and have that Premier League experience and, well, I mean, just general football experience, really, who have kind of stepped up under Emery and become leaders. I think it's a team full of leaders. And we used to talk about the great Chelsea sides, right? And you'd say, how many national captains are in that side? How many players are being like, you don't need to be cajoled because you're a leader yourself? And I think Villa have a bit of that. Everyone feels a bit like a leader in the Villa side. And that, I think, is a good place for them to be in terms of not everyone is really loud, but everyone, you know, by example, by some players, you know, some players are very vocal, etc. But that's the kind of atmosphere and culture that Emery has built there. And I think that with the amount of money they have, and potentially as the rules change after next season and we go away from PSR and into this new anchoring model and kind of spending on your revenues, etc., Villa should be able to take advantage of that to allow themselves to spend a little bit more. And when they do that, if they stay on the trajectory they're currently on, I think they're in a very good place to be considered within this conversation.
Yeah, and also, you know, with Leeds and Nottingham Forest, I talked about their traditions and their history. Obviously, Aston Villa, former European Cup winners too. Some huge names, some huge achievements.
And a massive stadium. And I know sometimes that kind of like, it sometimes goes by the by how much that matters. But in terms of income, in terms of revenue stream, all of those things, Villa are a genuinely huge club, gargantuan in so many ways. And when you look at that, you put them in those conversations with some of the teams that we've discussed as kind of perennial winners of this side. So I think that does matter, and I think it's an important point.
Yeah, I honestly, like, when I actually spent quite a lot of time covering Aston Villa for a few seasons when I was on the Sunday newspapers, and it always felt special. There was always something about Villa Park that made it feel a sort of privilege to be there. And you kind of were, when you walked out to go to your seat, you don't get as many places many times, but there were occasions when the going was good, when you would kind of get those goosebumps. Now, when the going's bad at Aston Villa, look, they do tend to be a bit flaky and the place is empty pretty fast. But the whole end on its day is up there in terms of like backing, in terms of noise, in terms of passion. Yeah, that place almost deserves a Premier League title one day. So we'll see whether they get it, but they're not at number one, Jack. The number one candidate to become the next new Premier League champion.
Can I ask a question? Is it someone owned by a nation state?
Newcastle United. It has to be Newcastle United. Now, obviously, this largely comes down to the fact that they have huge backing. Saudi Public Investment Fund, known as PIF, which when you read about them, means that they have a fantastic opportunity here. And there are huge comparisons to be made with what happened with Manchester City. Okay, different time, different era for sure, but
they're not allowed quite the same unabridged spending.
Well, no, they're not, and that's one of the things that will hold them back. But they have massive financial backing here. And of course, like, we do now have limitations on spending because of FFP, PSR, whatever. But Newcastle United, when this takeover happened, I mean, you remember all the headlines, like they were being linked with Mbappe and all sorts. Like, all of a sudden, like the fans were literally like, They lost their minds. They couldn't believe it. Now, part of that was because it ended the Mike Ashley era, right? The fans had really suffered under him and his lack of ambition for like 14 years or whatever it was. So the takeover changed the mindset of the place. Like this football mad city suddenly had a belief that they'd be able to compete for trophies and then maybe titles. They're in a cup final coming up against Liverpool, and it means the world to them. They also have the potential for big ambition, big growth. That stadium's great in itself already. They've got a manager that they're sticking by for right now in Eddie Howe. Whether he's the man that leads them to the Premier League title, I'm not so sure, but they're giving him every opportunity to try to do that. And obviously, since the takeover, they have already qualified for the Champions League and had their first hit at that. Okay, it didn't go great, and then they fell out of it, but they've had a taste of it. And as we sit right now,
and they held their own in the group of death, right? Like, yeah, it is important to remember that. It was a really tough task, and they gave a good account of themselves, I think, Newcastle United.
100%. And right now, they're sixth in the Premier League. They're on the cusp of qualifying for the Champions League for next season. They're in a cup final. Like, they're pretty well positioned here to go and do it. Now, when Man City had their big takeover was September 2008. Sheikh Mansour's Abu Dhabi group came in, bought the club. Man City went on to win the league within 4 years. It was in the 2011-2012 season that the Aguero moment came. And in those years, City had obviously gone out and they got Yaya Toure and David Silva and Vincent Kompany and Aguero, and they changed the management. They went big, right? And it paid off pretty quick. Now, that's not happening as quickly at Newcastle because they would basically be winning the league this season at that rate.
Yeah.
But
and they've had far more financial regulation to have to play
They
with.
have. But
which is a good thing, by the way. I'm just saying.
Yeah. They haven't yet had to sell their stars. They haven't really changed the philosophy. It's felt a little bit like the owners have backed off a bit with what they originally were promising. But I think a big season here, which we're seeing, is really, really important. Like it feels like they need to they've got to either make the Champions League this season or win a cup in order to really have the momentum to go and become the next new Premier League champion. Because otherwise, I think there will be a temptation for Isak to leave, for Bruno Guimaraes to leave, for Newcastle to potentially think about changing manager from Eddie Howe. But everything that we've got in front of us at the moment tells us that they have the financial muscle, they have the vision, they have the club size, they already have the squad that is building toward. Yeah, they've got it all there ready to make the best push possible to become that next big team.
Yeah, I mean, look, I said that with a smile on my face, not because I was saying it in any sort of jest. It remains, I think, in England, the best place I've ever watched a game of football, the Gallowgate. And hearing it in full voice is something truly, truly remarkable. So, like, I don't say that with any sort of cynicism. It is truly the most incredible stand, and the atmosphere at St James's Park is stunning. When it's at its very, very best. And I think that helps. I think the fact that football is a religion in Newcastle is a big thing. I've said this before, but St James's Park is placed in the city in a way that it feels like a cathedral. All roads lead to it. You can see it rising above the rooftops. It's a really quite special place, and it has this kind of draw that I can only speak about in terms from not neutral, but someone who isn't a Newcastle fan. I imagine to a Newcastle fan it must be the most incredible thing on planet Earth, but it's pretty special even from a non-Newcastle perspective. But I think that the key here is that we talk about money, and ultimately, in the words of our great friend Charlie Stilitano, it's the money, you morons. And when Newcastle are going to be able to spend, they're going to be able to, bring in a depth of squad, which I think they're lacking at the moment. We've seen some really interesting developments this season. I think that the emergence of Livramento and Lewis Hall as fullbacks has really elevated them. I think that they are one of the best fullback combinations in the league. We know how good Bruno is. We know how good Alexander Isak is, probably the best all-round number 9 in the Premier League right now. So when you put all of that together, the kind of bare bones of it are there. and they just need to sort of fill in a few gaps. Now, once that spending is changed from the current model, I think that things are going to change in Newcastle. But I also think that because Saudi Arabia is hosting a World Cup in 2030, there is going to be a renewed interest in trying to push those kind of vehicles. And look, this isn't me saying that I think this is a great thing, I'll be honest, but I think they will try and push vehicles that are pushing towards their interests to be successful in the build up to that World Cup. So we're sitting here and saying, okay, where are we and what kind of time frame? Well, I think if there's going to be a big push at Newcastle, it's going to coincide with the cycle of the Saudi Arabian World Cup coming up to 2030 and the PSR regulation being changed to that anchoring model, which will shift the balance somewhat in terms of what this, what a team can spend and where they are. So I don't think Newcastle are going to go out and win the Premier League next season. I don't think there's going to be, superstars coming through the door this summer. I think they will spend this summer. They've basically not added to the squad for basically 3 windows at this point, and I think that will change in the summer. But I think the next one is a stepping stone. The one after that, the big moves, I think will come in 2026 or 2027 to push them towards the top of the table. But it's about, for Newcastle now, finding and sustaining that Champions League place so that they can move forward into that new era off the back of a springboard, I think.
Yeah, I mean, look, the biggest problem for all of this is that they've got to hope that the standards drop from the big clubs.
Or they have to rise to meet them.
And they also have to hope that Man City don't keep spending. Because at the moment, however much financial muscle Newcastle might have, City can match it or better it. And they're not slowing down. City are about to go big again in the summer. So that's the difficulty too. So this isn't to say that, it's going to be next season that Newcastle or Aston Villa or Tottenham can go and win the Premier League. But we've got to give these teams hope. There's no point playing football if there's not the hope. So that's what we've tried to do today.
Yeah, absolutely. Well done, mate. That was a very good ranking, and I enjoyed discussing some of those possibilities. Now, I don't think all 5 are going to come in. I'd be very surprised if more than 2 come in.
Mate, if all 5 of those come in the next 10 years, I am a guru. I will be a guru.
You're quitting and going into clairvoyance, I think, is probably the way that we'll be discussing this in the future. But I'd be very surprised if they all come off. But I think there might be 1 or 2 shouts there that could be interesting. Hey, look, we might have to come back to this in 10 years' time and say, were we right? Were we wrong? Or did the same old teams keep winning the same old trophies? But I think it was a fun discussion nonetheless. And I think that will wrap us up for today. So all that's left for me to do is say thank you very much to Mr. Dean Jones.
Cheers, mate.
I've been Jack Collins. This has been Ranks FC. Thank you so much for listening as ever. We will be back late on Wednesday night with a Champions League takeaway, looking at all of the games that have occurred over the course of this week. 8 games for us to get stuck into. And then we'll be back on Friday on our Patreon as well with our Friday Fiesta. And there will be an episode of The Truth coming out on Friday as well, which is something to look forward to. But for now, and from us, thank you so much for listening. And we'll see you all very shortly. Take it easy, Rank Squad. Peace.
My new super smart Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra keeps me a step ahead thanks to Now Brief with Galaxy AI. It shows me my daily appointments at a glance so I can focus on my passion, posing my pups to recreate French paintings. Bruno, you look like a princess.
Galaxy S25 Ultra, the AI companion that streamlines your day so you can do you. Get yours at Samsung.com. Displays daily select info from select apps. May require internet connection. Galaxy AI features by Samsung free through 2025 and require Samsung account login.
Hello, Rag Squad. When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Aloe or Allbirds or Aviator Nation, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand and brilliant marketing, but an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the businesses, making selling and for shoppers buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does selling better than Shopify, who are home of the #1 checkout on the planet. And the not so secret with Shop Pay that boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning that there are way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going. So, if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling, on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. It's no secret, businesses that want to grow with Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/ranks, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/ranks to upgrade your selling today. That's shopify.com/ranks.